Brother Ron, R2C2H2 Tha Artivist, explains the meaning behind the art. The Last Gig, or the Maestro's Last Dance. The Rhythm Club Fire of 1940. This piece was done to commemorate the tragic Rhythm Club Night Fire of April 23rd, 1940 in Natchez, Mississippi. Over 209 people lost their lives that night in that horrible inferno, making it the second deadliest nightclub fire in U.S. history. The event was hosted by the Money Wasters Social Club. Ed Frazier, a member of the Money Wasters Social Club, organized and supervised the event that night. The band that was playing at the club was the Walter Barnes Orchestra. Walter Barnes was a very famous black jazz band leader from Chicago. Although he was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi, Mr. Barnes was raised in Chicago, where he was a gifted musical prodigy who attended music conservatory. Eventually, he became the favorite band leader of legendary gangster kingpin Alphonse Scarface Capone. Capone, who was known as Snorky by his friends, loved jazz music and loved to dance. And so he also favorited Walter Barnes, who was a very great jazz band leader and who he called Brother. Brother would play Al Capone's Cotton Club in Cicero, Illinois for several prosperous years. When Al Capone went to jail for income tax evasion, the gigs dried up and the money stopped flowing. Walter Barnes had to reinvent himself and go on the road. He became the columnist for the Chicago Defender. In his popular column, he would talk about places in the country where African Americans can go and have a good time, where they can eat the best food as well as stay at affordable places. This was the era of Jim Crow and sundown towns. So by default, Walter Barnes became the father, or rather the godfather, of the Chitlin Circuit. Through his column, he actually created a way for musicians to get gigs throughout the country. A map, as you will. For example, Walter Barnes will work his way through all the backwood juke joints as well as theater halls and auditoriums in the Southland, going through places like Tennessee, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas, and then resting in Florida, and then working his way back up that same map to Chicago. Tiny Bradshaw, who was the original band book for the Rhythm nightclub that fateful night, reneged on his contract, and instead he went to Harlem with his band to play at the world-famous Apollo Theater. Walter Barnes was contacted at the last minute. Although he was hesitant, he took the gig anyway, not realizing that would be his last gig on planet Earth. The Rhythm nightclub was packed that night, inside and out. There was an estimated 700 people on the premises of the nightclub. Ed Frazier, in order to keep people from sticking in and dancing and listening for free, boarded up all the windows and doors except for the front entrance to the club. Spanish moss hang from the rafters of the club for decoration. It was sprayed with insecticide, which also had fuel in it, to kill off any bugs that might be in the Spanish moss. Around 11:30 p.m. on April 23rd, 1940, the Spanish moss caught on fire, spreading quickly throughout the club. People panicked, but there was only one way out. The building was made out of corrugated tin, turning a bright, fiery red, according to witnesses. This made the building into an oven, which in effect was cooking and torturing the people inside to their gruesome deaths. Most of the people who died that night died from being smothered and crushed to death, trying to get out the club. Walter Barnes, realizing that by his band being on stage in the back of the club, did not have a snowball chance in hell to get out, instead took on the hero role, like a captain going down with his ship. He told his band, in order to keep the people as calm as possible, to play the popular song Marie. One of the last things that people heard from the band that night was trumpeter Paul Stott, who had the bad fortune of hooking up with the Walter Barnes band because he was stranded by his circus troupe in the Carolinas, hit a high note as the roof fell on top of the stage. Only 2 members out of Walter Barnes' 11-piece orchestra survived that night, and Paul Stott, who was working his way back home to Indianapolis, wasn't one of them. Some people think that a cigarette was lit and that fire was an accident, but who knows for sure. 209 people lost their souls that night, mostly high school age and in their 20s. If you really think about it, these would have been the people, had they lived, that would have been involved in perhaps the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. But unfortunately, we'll never know. Most of the victims were buried in mass graves in Natchez. Walter Barnes received a hero's homegoing in Chicago. Over 15,000 people attended his funeral. Walter Barnes is interred in the historic Burr Oak Cemetery outside Chicago. This is the same cemetery where Emmett Till and his mother, Mamie Till, are also interred, along with historical black figures. This was also the same cemetery that was involved in a scandal which involved mismanagement and the disturbing of buried bodies. I do not believe that Walter Barnes' grave was disturbed. Many tribute songs, jazz and blues, were created and played in honor of Walter Barnes' memory. He instantly became a black folk hero. And the rest, as they say, is history.